His J is Stone Go. Hi, Mr. Gibson's third grade class. It's good to talk to you today. I'm Melba Chakoti Eads, and Chakoti is my family's name, and they were Hijiti tribal town of the Muskogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma. So, the Creeks, as they were called, were a confederacy of many towns and many different peoples that joined together in a confederacy. And so my great-great-grandfather was Hijiti, and his wife, would be my great-great-grandmother, was Coweta. So those are two different towns, two different tribal peoples that joined together to be part of the members of the Muskogee Creek Nation. So this is before Indian removal, and their lands were, the Hijitis came from lower Georgia, and the Cowetas from mid Alabama. So Georgia and Alabama was our homelands, and parts of Tennessee. Chattanooga is a Creek word that means big rocks, something about rocks, hard rocks, big rocks, anyways. So Chattanooga is Muskogee language, and that area was pure Muskogee, and Yuchi were there in that settlement. So Hijitis were here in Tennessee, Tuskegees were here, Alabamos were here, Quasatis, Yuchis. Those are all tribes, little tribes that were members of the Confederacy of the Muskogee Creek Nation. So now you've got a big, broad idea of how many different peoples made up the Muskogee Creek Nation. So I think one of the questions you had talked about was our tribal dress. Well, you know, being in the South, we didn't wear just heavy clothing, and our houses were not just big, heavy houses. However, we lived in cabins, and we had areas that were four-sided, kind of like the Seminoles Cheekies are today, because it was hot. And so we had summer houses and we had winter houses. And we lived on a four-square ground, which was included a chucky field, which is a ball field. You know, every town had a ball field because we loved to play ball. And then we had our council building, which was the bigger government, and where the beloved men, the Mikos, or the kings of the town, would hold their meetings. And then we would have the other buildings. The Miko Council building always faced east and was probably in the most center part of the town. The little cabin area that was open area was always to the south, and then the little other houses set around it. And after Indian removal, when they started churches, they started the church in the same way. The church faced east, and the open area was always to the south, and then the cabins or houses of the church families were around in a square around facing the church. So we carried that with us from the east to the west on the Trail of Tears, what became known as the Trail of Tears. Now, when you talk about the Trail of Tears, this is the 5 tribes. It's ethnic cleansing of the whole southeast. And so that's the Cherokees, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, the Seminoles, and the Muskogee Creek people, which is my people. So we mostly ethnic cleansing of the whole southeast, because all those tribes were removed from their homelands to homes in the west across the Mississippi into Oklahoma. Now, before Indian removal, There was a treaty agreement signed with the English first because the Creek people were allies to the English. And you know, we had a big revolution where America fought the English. So, excuse me, the Creeks were probably on the wrong side because we were allies with the English. A lot of our tribal members, of course, English were the first people that came upon our lands. And they, of course, married Indian women because if you wanted status in a community, you needed a Creek wife. So good Creek women were a commodity. You could trade, you could set up trading posts, you could own land without being killed or run out of town. So you needed a Creek wife. So in the early days, we had chiefs, Micos, William McIntosh. Of course, you know that's not an Indian name. We had Alexander McGillicree. You know that's not an Indian name. But these are all the leaders, the leading men at that time, and their fathers were non-Indian, they were English. So we sided with the English in our first big treaty with America, because a lot of our Micos in the early days, they were soldiers in the Revolutionary War, and many of them had been fighting on the English side. So that's continued to be a little bit of a hill for us to climb over, because we did side with the English. So the War of 1813, when Andrew Jackson came down to fight the British in New Orleans, well, on the way, he had to wipe out all the Creek Nation first. So he came down through Tennessee, through the whole middle of Alabama, down the Coosa Valley, and every town he hit, and I have to talk as a Muskogee person here, he murdered and killed all the peoples in the town. He took women and children prisoners, and they remained prisoners of war. And the last battle of the Creek War was, I believe that was 1813. Or may have been 14. I'm going to get your teacher will have to straighten that out now. But that was March 27th, the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. And that Horseshoe Bend is a place in Alabama, and that was a terrible war. All the Creek towns, there were 6 towns that had fortified themselves there. And they did their last dance on the stomp ground, or the 4 square ground that we talked about earlier, the town. They had all joined there. They did their last dance, their prayers, their last dance, because they were prepared to die, to fight to the death the next day. And Andrew Jackson came with thousands and thousands of federal soldiers and Tennessee Volunteer Army to murder the Creeks at Horseshoe Bend. And it was a horrible battle. It was a horrible massacre. And after they didn't have guns. They had very few guns. And of course, you have to think back at that day. They didn't have bullets exactly. They had little round balls and gunpowder. So if those of you who have fathers that do black gunpowder rifles, you will understand you have to put that ball into the rifle. Then you have to pour just the right amount of gunpowder in there. Then you take a long spear thing and you jam it down in that rifle. And then you fire it. Good luck if there's an Indian coming after you to whack your head off, because if you didn't get your gun loaded fast enough, you were dead. Because the Indians had what is called a red stick club. A red stick, but it was actually a club. At the end of it was a huge club or hatchet, and they were deadly because whack, whack, and you're gone. So not only did they have a club, they were fast runners. So it was hand-to-hand battle. It was a terrible battle. And over 800 Creek Indian warriors lay dead on the battlefield. And at the 200 memorial in 2014, I went there, and we, the Muskogee Creek Nation, we came in buses to that battleground to do a memorial, to memorialize the Creek dead that were left on that battlefield. Their bodies were left there. And wherever the warriors, we did what is called illumination. And so that's a candle in like a little bag. And we lit up that whole battle crowd. And there was over 800 of them. And I think there was about 100 or so of the opposing armies who were killed. Very few were killed. And so that was quite a touching time to see those luminaries burning that night to honor our war dead. But down in the village side or the town side along the Tallapoosa River there in Alabama, there was 350 women and children, non-combatants, taken as prisoners of war. And Andrew Jackson sold Little Creek boys, children, for $20. If you were in the volunteer Tennessee Army, the volunteers, you know, if you had a $20 bill, you could buy a Creek child and take him home as a pet. That is historical. That's written down. So our people have suffered terribly. And the Creek people, the Muskogee people, are hardly talked about because we were hated so. We fought in one single day in all the Indian battles in the whole United States, out west, northwest, southwest, wherever. In one single day, more Indians fell to death at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in Alabama. So if you ever get an opportunity, you might want to go down there and see that place where they fell. Well, I guess that's all I've got to say. I hope you have a great study, and I hope you can try to understand and maybe look into this more. There's a lot to be said, but if I tried to tell you, we'd be talking for 2 days. Let's just call it a quits now. And you have a great study. Hope I get to see you. Bye-bye.